Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I don't know what happened to Michal. He ran out. We are sponsored on this tour through Shavuos by an anonymous sponsor for their spiritual, emotional, and physical protection for Yeshua Menachem Mendel, Ben Bela, Shendel, Rivka. We're also sponsored by Sheldon Zeitlin for his children, Eli, Orit, and Ora, and for my Refuah Shalema, my Shmei Ben Esther Fradel. And we're sponsored by A.B. Spry for Toiba Reiza Bashinda and for Zivugim for their daughter and their grandchildren. Wonderful Zivugim. We are holding at the top line of Daf Yud Aleph Amud Aleph. Just to refresh your memories, the discussion started with what happens if we have sheep remaining in the bullpen at the end of the year that can't be used anymore because we have to now use karbonis from the new shkolim. So Rava said a chiddush that you're allowed to redeem them. Ula said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan that you're allowed to redeem them even though they are tmimim, even though they are unblemished. So the Gemara says, where did the Kedusha go? So the Gemara says, well, don't you hold that you could redeem things that have Kedushas Haguf? After all, we could redeem the Ketairis, the extra Ketairis. Again, we could redeem them, even though they have a Kedushas Guf. So the Gemara answered, nah, Ketairis is not the same thing. Ketairis, since it was only put in the mortar, and the mortar is not a clay sharis, it only has Kedushas Damim. And the Kedushas Damim you could redeem. Right? That's how we ended off Shani Ketairis, the Kedushas Damim. And you know something? We can now welcome everybody in, as we welcome in Shelley Zeitlin, Irving Fishbaum, Dr. Black. I don't know who that is in the black out there. Nachman Chapler, Saba, Eddie Chazan, Mo Kushner, Yaakov Warman, Dr. Guy, Michal, Reuven Pollack, Dov Solkowitz, Mark Frankel, Yitzi Fuchs, Rabbi Kranz, Barry Semen, Shimon Klein, that's Menachem Umansky, Stephen Holtzman, Danny Vogel, Moshe Lehman, Yeshua Shmuel Eisenberg, Richard Rosenzweig, Ilya Shutman, Yitzi Muller, Abe Arbach. Thank you, Abe. I got the batteries, and they are in the recorder, and they're in the microphone. And David Helfgott. Here in Shul, we are rich in that we welcome in Barish Gesseman and Avram Zepkowitz, Chaim Kramer, Reb Kraus, and Ruvain Shannet. I'm expecting maybe Michal to be back soon. So the Gemara now says, if Ketairis only has Kedushas Damim, Elamiyata loitipasal b'tful yaim, it shouldn't be disqualified if touched by a tfil yaim. Tfil yaim is somebody who touched the sheretz, went to the mikveh, and is awaiting Herav Shemesh. Now it says that the Ketairis are disqualified by a tfil yaim. But if it only has Kedushas Damim, then why is it disqualified by Tfil Yom? Allah Matanya, Nosta b'machteshes nifseles b'Tfil Yom. Says the Gemara, so maybe we're wrong. Maybe something that has a Kedushas Damim is disqualified by a Tfil Yom. V'chi tema kol Kedushas Damim mifslei b'Tfil Yom. That even if it has Kedushas Damim, it's disqualified by a tfil yom. But Tanan, we learned in the Mishnah, Hamenacha is meal offerings. Once you sanctify it, there's Mila. There's Mila even by Kedusha's Damin. Kitchu Bekeli, when you sanctify it in the clay shares, then Hochshiruli Pasal B'Tfil Yom, it's rendered susceptible to be disqualified by Tfil Yom, or by Mechusik Kippurim, or somebody who went to the mikveh but is awaiting on the 8th day to bring his karbanas, or Belina, and then it's disqualified if it's left overnight. So you see clearly over here, Kitchu Bekeli in, only if it's sanctified in a clay shavis, like Kitchu Bekeli like. It says Gemara, Elamai, what are you going to say, Kedushas Hagofi? That it has a physical sanctity? Elamiata Tipasa Belina. Then the Ketara should be disqualified if left overnight. Alama Tanan, HaKaimetz Valavina, the Kmitza, and frankincense, Vakteris, or Minchas Kahanim, which is entirely burnt. Minchas Kahanim is entirely burnt. Or Minchas Kayim Mashuach, and Mincha of the Kayin Gadol, which is also entirely burnt. Or Minchas Nesachim, Moyelim Ben Mishuk Tishu. There's Mila when it's sanctified. Kitchu Bekeli, when it's sanctified in a Keli, Hochshuruli Pasal B'Tfil Yom Amuchas Ikriparim Belina. So we see Kitchu Bekeli in only when the Ketairis is sanctified in the Keli, like Kitchu Bekeli light, but before, even though it was prepared in the Machteshes, there's no Lina. But if it has Kedushas Hagof, why isn't there Lina? So the Gemara says, really, when it's put in the Machteshes, it already has Kedushas Hagof. And that's the reason why it's disqualified by Tfil Yom. But the reason why it's not disqualified by being left overnight, Amalei Lina Kamrit. Shani Ketairis, the concept of leaving it overnight is because it gets a change, being left for a long time. Shani Ketairis Hoyo B'Tzurasa B'Kol HaShana Kula. Its composition, its makeup does not change throughout the year. Now, you'll ask me, so then how come when you put it in a keli, it is nifselas belina? So that Taisus says elsewhere, that's because, welcome, good to have you. I hear I missed Florence on Erev Shabbos. I was sorry to have missed her.
She was the one who told me to come to her.
Good.
The Mashkiach spoke.
Bravo to Florence. Says the Gemara, the reason why it's nefselas belina when it's put in a keli is because of Gzeira. You see, other things are not put in a Machteshes, but all other things are put in a keli. And if you're going to say that the Ketairis is not disqualified with Lina, then people might say other things that are put in a keli are not disqualified by Lina. But otherwise, there's no Lina by Ketairis because there's no change in its makeup. However, the Gemara says, Mikol Makam Kasha. Okay, we got sidetracked. But let's get back to the subject. Both the Kedusha of the sheep that don't have a mum and the Kedusha of the Ketairis, where does the Kedusha Saguf go? V'chi Kedusha shebehen le'eichon holcha. You can't remove physical Kedusha. You can remove Kedusha's Damim because that's not intrinsic. But you can remove physical Kedusha. Says the Gemara, Now the Gemara introduces a whole new idea. Amar Rabbah. Rabbah says, Leiv Bezdin Masna Lehan. That when they received their Kedusha, it was conditional. It was conditional if they're needed. If they're not needed, it doesn't have the Kedusha. Leiv Bezdin Masna Lehan, Im Hutzrichu Hutzrichu, Vim Lav Yulid Meim. It's only sanctified for its value. That's why you still have to redeem it. It's sanctified for its value. Amalei Abaya, V'aho Marhu Da'amar, the master said, Hikdish Zachar L'Damav, that if you're makdish a sheep, male sheep, for its value, Kaddish Kedushas Haguf, it automatically gets Kedushas Haguf, so that means you can't do something conditional. Because even if you outright said, I'm only sanctifying it for its value, it still gets a Kedushas Haguf. You see, it doesn't help it to be conditional if it's fit. Says the Gemara, there's different ways of making a condition. If you say, I'm sanctifying this sheep for that its value should buy an oila, and the sheep itself is fit for an oila, that you can't do. It right away takes on a Kedushas oila. If you say, I'm sanctifying this sheep to use its money for libations, so then it only gets a Kedushas Damim for libation. So here, it was conditional. What ends up happening to this extra sheep that's in the bullpen? The extra sheep that's in the bullpen, its money is used for the gold plating in the Kodesh Kedoshim. So that's, the condition would be not that it should have a Kedusha of an Ayla. So Abaya has a different problem with this, as we welcome him in, Naftali Jablin, for our 28th Zoomer of the evening.
So it's really how you set it up beforehand. It's not really Basin that's doing it. It's the person who's donating it that says it. The Kedusha.
In this case, it's Leiv Bezdin.
Why is it Bezdin?
Because it's the Gizber that buys the.
So he's the one who says "L'dmei nesachim" or
right.
Okay.
Now.
It says that it goes from gold. Didn't they have gold? I mean, would the gold wear away or what?
They kept on adding to it.
Oh, okay.
They kept on adding to it, making it thicker. Eisvei Abaya. Par v'sor shel Yom HaKippurim. Now, boy, it's hard to imagine how this could happen. These are such protected animals, but anything could happen. The bull, the he-goat of Yom Kippur, she'avdu, that got lost. V'hifresh acherim tachteim, and they separated others in its stead. V'chein, another national offering. V'chein sirei avodah zarah, the sar of avodah zarah. This is a case of communal idolatry. Bezdin was questioned if something was idolatry, and they paskin it's not idolatry. Now, by the way, that's not as hard to imagine as it sounds. In the famous Igeres Teiban, the Rambam paskined that people didn't have to sacrifice their life to accept Islam, as he ruled that the belief was a monotheistic belief, and therefore it's not considered avodah zarah. Others argued, but that was the Ramban. They asked the Ramban if they have to be moiser nefesh. Avodah zarah is yarek val yava, and the famous psak, the Igeres Teiman, the Rambam paskin, that they didn't have to give up their lives. Right, so you see that there could be a fine line by idolatry. So if Bezdin made an erroneous psak, and the tzibur worshipped, and then they realized that it was really idolatry, so they brought a sarah of avodah zarah. They brought a higo, and it got lost. And then they found the original ones, both the Sar Par of Yom Kippur or the original Sar of Avodah Zarah. Kulan Yamusu. They're left in a kippah to die. Why? Because there's halach l'moshe Sinai that 5 chatas have to die, and one of those examples is a chatas that gets lost. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon Aimrim, no, Yiruachi Yistavu. In this case, it's not included in the Halacha Moshe Sinai, but rather they should be left to pasture until they get a mum, v'yamachru, then they should be redeemed, v'yiplu d'meim l'nedava, and their money should go into the kafir marked as nedava, where they bring communal burnt offerings l'kayetz ha-mizbeach, when business is slow on the mizbeach. The question is, why? Because he says, she'ein chatas tzibur meisa, because a communal chatas doesn't die. The question is, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yehuda says that it has to die. Why don't we say, leiv bezdin masna lein, that if it gets lost, it should only have a kedushas damim. V'amai leima leiv bezdin masna lein. Says Gemara, avudin kamet. You're talking about where it's lost? Shani avudin do leishchiche. Getting lost, that's not something that's frequent, and therefore, since it's not something that's frequent, Bezdin doesn't stipulate about it. Having extra stuff happens every year, so therefore Bezdin stipulates. So the Gemara says, well, if you want to talk about rare things, there's hardly anything more rare than the paraduma. Since the time of Moshe, only 7 paradumas were brought. That's a very rare thing. Really rare. It's rarer than Birchas Hachama. You know, for 40 years, about 40 years, I put out a tape every week. And taped and CDs. Before CDs went defunct, I sent out 300,000 or 400,000 CDs. Sent out over 1 million tapes. And I always had to have a name for the tape. So I remember when I gave a shir on Birchas Hachama, I called it the rarest bracha of them all. And Shelley is nodding his head. He remembers the tape. And then I realized that I made a mistake. It's not the rarest blessing of them all. There's a more rare blessing. It's a blessing in my lifetime that I never made. I made Birchas Hachama already, more than once. We had somebody in our shul who did it 4 times. Now that Ruvain, Mr. Leifer, did it 4 times. Should be b'zaycha, all of us should be zaycha. But anyway, the rarest bracha is the bracha of Chacham Harazim. Is a bracha that you make if you see 600,000 Yidden. They made the bracha by Rav Avadia Yosef Silvaya. At the time, a very interesting thing, at the time, someone sent a message from the funeral to Reb Chaim Kanievsky that they were reporting that there were over 800,000 people by the Levaya, so they wanted to know if they could make the bracha with Shema Malchus. And Rav Avadi Yosef told them to make it. But that's a very rare bracha. Chacham Arazim. But, yeah, that's true, it is. But even so, it's, for that purpose, it's rare. The Reuven, you were there when I did it, Barabim in the shul. I did it by both Zmanim. Do you remember that?
I remember one that we did it on the front, outside the shul.
Right. And I remember I made on the first time I made it, I made a shechianu on a case, and the second time I made a shechianu on a watch. But anyway,
What's the next one coming up?
a few weeks.
Okay, I walked into that one. Thank you.
So the Gemara says, "Hare para deloy shchicha," a para aduma, the red cow. It's very, very rare. Misanya para niptis al kopsul sheba. The para could be redeemed if it has any psul. If, let's say, it's work was done with it, or it grew some black hairs, it could be redeemed. Mesa, if it dies, tipada, you could redeem it. Nishkata, if it was slaughtered in the wrong place, they dug a special pyre, and it was in a place where could be no tumas hatahim, and it was by the harazesim, and they slaughtered it there. If it was slaughtered in the wrong place, it could be redeemed. But get a load of this. Matz acheres nohemena tipada. If you find one better than it, it could also be redeemed. But shchata al gabe marachasa, but once you shecht it on its pyre, then it's not bakavedik anymore to redeem it. Ein lapdi aylamas. Then you can't redeem it. You have to burn it. Question is, how are you allowed to redeem it if you find a better one? Says the Gemara, that's not a problem. A para aduma doesn't go on the mizbeach. It doesn't have kedushas haguf. Shani para the kache bedikabayasi, that has the sanctification of temple maintenance, and that's why you could redeem it. It only has a monetary sanctification. It doesn't have a physical sanctification. Says Gemara, if it has kedushas bedikabayas, then you have another problem. Kedushas bedikabayas, you could only redeem it with the formality of hamad of aracha, standing it up and evaluating it. If it died or was slaughtered in the wrong place, you could redeem it. How could you redeem it? You have to stand it up and evaluate it. Says, well, no problem. It's going according to Reb Shimon, that Reb Shimon holds that Kedushas bedikabayas doesn't need hamad v'aracha. Says, well, mani Reb Shimoni. Dame kach mizbeach you b'chlal hamad v'aracha. Kach bedikabayas lo you b'chlal hamad v'aracha. So it doesn't have to be stood up. It says, well, it can't be going according to Reb Shimon. Why? Reb Shimon amos seifa shchata al gabe marach ein la p'diyai lamas. Once you shechted it by the pyre, you can't redeem it at all. But Tanya, here we learned, this is really pulling something out from left field. You know, you don't appreciate how these things, these applications are made from left field. But Tanya, Rabbi Shimon Aimer para, the para aduma metama tumas eichelen is susceptible to the tumah of food. Now, when is it a food? Hoyel v'hoysel hashas hakosher. Since when you shechted it on the maracha, if you find a better one, you could still redeem it. And once you redeem it, you can eat it. It could be redeemed even on its pyre. So obviously it can't be Reb Shimon. Because if it's Reb Shimon, here it says that you can't redeem it once it's on the pyre. Now if it's not Reb Shimon, so if it has Kotche Beta Kabayis, then you shouldn't be able to redeem it because it needs Hamad of Aracha. So the Gemara answers a different question. How could you redeem it? The Gemara says, I'll tell you how you could redeem it. Because since it's such a rare and priceless thing, so therefore the Gemara stipulates it, even makes a stipulation, even though it's so rare. Alashani para hayol v'damel yikarit. The para is different since it's very valuable, and that's why they made a conditional stipulation on it, even though it's very rare. Now, there's another problem. It says if it dies, you could redeem it. Now, it's not likely that the court made a stipulation if it dies, because Misa is surely lo shlicha. So that means it still retains its holiness. And then, once it dies, you shouldn't be able to redeem it, because what are you going to do? You're either going to give it to a dog or sell it to a guy. And we have a klal, ein poidin as a kachin lachilun l'kalavin. Abamar, mesa tipadeh. However, ask the Gemara, v'chi poidin as a kachin lachilun l'kalavin? Do we redeem kachim to feed them to dogs? Amar Mashashia, no, you redeem it because of the hides. Amar Mashashia misham ayra. Says Gemara, v'kaima bezdin umasnu adata da'ora. Hold on, now this question is difficult to understand, because if I see. You see, the question of tipadeh is shver even if it has kedushas damim. In other words, the T'nai allows it to be redeemed, but it still has a kedushas damim, and therefore, how could you redeem it if it's going to be for the dogs? So it says we redeem it for the hide. So that means that there would be a leiv masneh for hides. Does Bezdin stipulate just for the hides? Rav Kahana, yes. The hide of a animal is expensive. Imre inche migamla una. From a camel, even its ear is expensive. So the hide of an animal is expensive. So now the Gemara says, Eisvei, Amru later Reb Shimon, they told Reb Shimon, Maushi yikruvu zebazeh. They told Reb Shimon, if let's say there was a musaf offering and they lost it, and they now found it, can they offer it for another musaf offering? Let's say you had a musaf if you had a musaf of Rosh Chodesh and you lost it, could you use it for a musaf of Yom Tov? Amalahu Yikrivu. Yeah, you can. Amrulai, they said to him, how could it be? Hayil ve'en kaparosh and Shabbat, since their kapara is not the same, right? We know that some are mechaper for a person that eats kachim betuma, and one is mechaper for ein bo yodiyah loy betchila v'loy b'sayif, and one is mechaper for ein bo yodiyah betchila v'yesh bo yodiyah b'sayif. So how could they be offered one for another? So hayil ve'en kaparas and Shabbat, they don't atone for the same thing. Hey chen craven, how could they be offered up? So Reb Shimon said to them, "Kulin ba and lechaper al tumas mikdash kedusha." It's enough; they fall all under the umbrella of tumas mikdash kedusha. It's a different variables. Ein bo yediyah like b'tchila v'like b'sayif, ein bo yediyah b'tchila v'yesh bo yediyah b'sayif, eating kachim tamei, but they're all under that umbrella. Says the Gemara. Reb Shimon could have gave a much more easy answer. Reb Shimon could have said that leiv bezdin masna. V'amai lema leiv bezdin masna land. That if they're not used for one, they could use for another. Says the Gemara, you're talking Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon doesn't hold of leiv bezdin masna. Reb Shimon comment. Reb Shimon lets leiv bezdin masna land. Damar Rav Yidibav and Amar Rav Amram Amar Rav Yochanan. Tamidim shaloi hutzruchu l'tzibur, right? Those sheep that were in the bullpen. Reb Shimon ain't niptin tamimim. They can't be redeemed tamimim. Reb Shimon Taka doesn't hold of leiv bezdin masna. So then they would have to be left out to pasture until they got a mum. L'divrei chachamim, according to chachamim, niptin tamimim. You say leiv bezdin masna. Therefore, since Reb Shimon doesn't hold of the concept of leiv bezdin masna, therefore Reb Shimon had to say a different reason that you could use one of the goats of, let's say, Yom Tov. You could use it for musaf of Rosh Chodesh. You could use the goat of Yom Tov for the musaf of Yom Kippur, the Sarah Chitzai, because they all fall under the rubric, they all fall under the umbrella of Tumas Mikdash Kedusha, even though they're different variables of it. Okay, once again, we thank Olam 29 Zoomers, really wonderful Olam here. Again, a reminder: we do not yet have a sponsor for Parshas Emor. So we're looking there to the Kol HaLashon YouTube, TorahAnytime.com World, 718-916-3100, rmmwsi@aol.com. Thank you very much, everyone. And if you didn't eat matzah yet, according to my Zayda, the Imrei Eish, the main time to eat matzah is tonight, the time of the Echila of the Pesach. And if you have some romaine lettuce, he ate maror with it as well. So have romaine lettuce, you could have a little salad. If you have some afikoymen left over, it's a real nice thing to do. And have a wonderful evening, everyone.